Because if you're threatening them, again, you're in compliance. Instead, we wait until we have leverage and then we just execute on holding them accountable. If you don't have strategic leverage, you're probably getting into power struggles with your kids. If you're getting into a power struggle with your kid, then you're an equal, and they're coming in and out of that hierarchy, which is also anxiety provoking.
Parenting is hard. Here on the Modern Parenting Manual, we believe it takes a village to raise children, and that all of us could use some inspiration to help us along this crazy journey called parenting. And that's what the Modern Parenting Manual does, connecting you with parents doing interesting things that hopefully provide some inspiration to you too. Your time matters, so let's dive right in and hear from Matthew Maynard, a licensed marriage and family therapist and creator of Emotionally Strategic Parenting, about his work along with his own personal parenting journey. Matthew, being a parent is hard. It's about keeping our children safe and happy and having a little, or maybe a lot, of fun, and hopefully raising them to be contributing members of society one day. There's so many things that we're trying to achieve all through the everyday with children. I'm looking forward to our discussion today and to see what tidbits I can take away and help with my own family dynamics, and I'm sure our audiences too.
Solid, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. I'm excited.
So let's jump right in and talk about some questions. First, how has being a parent changed your own approach to your work with families and children?
Yeah, so I think part of me and my own kind of journey, I have two kids. One of them is 4.5. He's going to be 5 in September. The other one's actually turning 2 on the 29th. So I have a boy and a girl. So big portion of it is you really don't know what's going to kind of pop up for you until you kind of like have them, and until there's like a dynamic set in motion, because their personalities are all different. And I think going all in more with like an open mind of being able to be flexible is something where I think a lot of people have a vision and an idea of what they want their kids to be like, how they're going to be as a parent. And then largely that gets set on fire pretty quickly once they start to develop a personality.
So true.
And I think a lot of people have a hard time stepping away from the vision of what they had versus leaning into the reality of where they are. And so I think for everybody, I think that was my biggest challenge. And I think also in different phases of like their development, they're going to be in those different phases of development also influence, I think, a large portion of your own identity and how you feel and what your vision versus the reality of what it is. And so I think just being able to be more open-minded and almost curious about how to leverage where they're at rather than try and pull them to where you want them to be based on your own vision is something that I think I struggled with. But I think in my own work in helping parents, I've kind of also helped them to kind of see that. Plus our ghosts from our family of origin and kind of those dynamics also bleed in, which is why I do family therapy, and a large portion as to why I built my parenting system.
I can see what you're saying, because I think something we don't talk about, especially to new parents or expecting parents, is that parenting is just difficult. It's lovely. It's fabulous. It changes your life in so many ways for the better, but that every day is really hard. And we don't really talk about that, right? We talk about, and we put out pictures and it all seems like this fun, harmonious thing. And then you get into it and you're like, oh my gosh, my life has changed. And it's really hard trying to keep someone else alive and happy and hopefully thriving.
Yeah. And I think everybody has, again, that vision, and they have like these pinnacle moments of like the highlights of what it's going to look like. But the real life is in those small, little day-to-day interactions that are like, you think are meaningless, but are actually everything, right?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people, again, that big vision and kind of their expectations of that are what overshadow a lot of that, I think, for people.
So related to this, in your work, you talk about treating, I'll call it the system that people are stuck in, and not just symptoms. And can you explain what that means to people in the context of family life and parenting?
Yeah, yeah. So I think a lot of the modern parenting stuff out right now is all, I think, really great and well intentioned. I think it's largely missing a family systems component. So if you look at like anybody that's super popular, I'm not going to name any names, they're very fixated on the relational dynamic between the parent and the child, which, don't get me wrong, is great, right? You obviously want to build good rapport, have a great connection, and I'm all about that. That's actually a big part of my system. The part that I think everybody kind of misses is the family structure as a whole and how that ultimately bleeds into and can create some of this dysfunctional behavior, I think, in kids. And a big portion of, I think, modern parenting, or like a lot of parents are really worried about this, is they're very hyper fixated on attachment. Oh, I need to make sure my kid's attached. I need to make sure they feel safe. I need to make sure, and that's important. Don't get me wrong. Again, but that can all too much of anything good can become bad. Too much water can become bad. Too much love and attachment can become what's called enmeshment in family therapy. So, and when you start to become enmeshed, the boundaries between your identity, your emotions, and who you are as a parent start to bleed and get entangled into the emotions, the identity, and how the child functions. And that's like two of those. Remember when you used to get the old iPhones? They'd come with the wired earbuds?
Yes.
And if you took a couple pairs of those and you put them in a travel bag and you only took them out when you traveled, but a bunch of stuff got in and out, you'd wind up trying to detangle those earbuds and you'd just wind up throwing the whole bunch of them away because they were so tangled. That's what modern parenting, I think, has ultimately become. And so when people are looking at a lot of the symptoms of what they're having with kids, they think, oh, I need to be more attached. Oh, I need to give them more attention. Oh, I need to be more emotionally attuned. And quite honestly, they're actually getting more and more enmeshed, which is making things worse and worse and worse. But again, it's well intentioned, but it's missing kind of this overarching family structure that's so incredibly powerful for kids to feel stable and secure. And so there's a whole family therapy and a whole family therapy theory on this called structural family therapy. And so a big part of structural family therapy is about being able to maintain this hierarchy and have these boundaries between the parents and the kids so you can have emotional intimacy and closeness without getting enmeshed. And so that's why I focus more on the family system as a whole, because if you just focus on the parent-child relationship, you're only going to see kind of that's like one piece of a pizza pie and it's like, why are we just going to look at that one sliver when you're missing 90% of the pie? So that's what I talk about.
And I appreciate that. And I also wonder if part of what we're struggling with sort of the current generation who is parenting younger children, so adults who are in, let's say, their 30s and 40s, is we lived in a time when frankly, parenting was fairly strict. There were a lot of expectations about how you were to behave inside the home and outside the home.
Yeah.
And I see, particularly through friends who like try to almost reverse that. And so because they have felt such restriction that they don't want to create any restriction on their children. And yet they're disciplined, and interactions with children and that the opposite environment also becomes really hard, right? Where you don't have a structure about how you're expecting children to behave and how they can do that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, and I talk about this all the time, and this is actually a part of, and I'll talk about this after, but it's a part of my book, where there used to be a village that would raise kids. And now we've kind of become a little paranoid of the village. We kind of go after some of the teachers. We're going after the police. We're going after what another family does. There's no real kind of cohesive unit where parents are actually working collaboratively to empathize and almost work together to raise these kids anymore. It's almost become hyper individualized, which I think has its pros and its cons because, kids are individually all going to be uniquely different. The struggle I think that a lot of parents also have too is again, they were seen, not heard. Most of effective parenting was physical abuse in today's standards. And I think a lot of it is also emotional and verbal abuse too in today's standards. So a lot of that swung the pendulum, I think, a little bit too far. And a lot of people with like gentle parenting is a great example where they don't like using consequences. They still want to draw boundaries. They call them boundaries, but they're verbal boundaries. And you and I both know that words without action are like meaningless, right? It's
Sure.
like saying I love you but never hugging your kid, right? It's the same thing. And so a big portion of what I do and what I think a lot of parents are struggling to maintain and do is they're trying to balance two things. One, they want to have a loving relationship with their kids, and they know that their kids' emotions matter, right?
Yeah,
And I do
absolutely.
too. There's a degree to that though where that needs to also be balanced with some level of individual, like some individual responsibility, and them starting to become self-sufficient. And these two things are constantly at war, which is more often than not when I get parents that call me, one parent is more relationally emotionally based and the other is more independent, resilient, self-sufficiency based, and those two things are pushing and pulling, right? And again, sometimes it's gender normative. Sometimes I've had it where the dad is more of the emotionally relationally attuned
Mm.
one, and the mom's more like, no, they got to be more independent. I'm tired of taking care of them and doing everything for them. So it's not necessarily gender specific, but those two things I think are based on kind of generational family of origin upbringing. And again, people are still now trying to figure out, well, when you talk about consequences with their generation or with our generation and the generation even, because I'm 36, so
Okay.
people that are in their 40s were more often than not hit more, right?
Hmm.
The older generation, they tend to want to be much more softer, gentler, and they hear the word consequence, they immediately think punishment, they think punitive, they think angry, they think control. They have all these associations with that where it's like, whoa, 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 I don't know if I like this, and I'm like, no, hold on, you want to, I think we need to use consequences and hold people accountable, because what we really want to do is hold our kids accountable to these reasonable standards, right? These expectations, while also loving through the process of them learning how to embrace that, right? They come from a generation more often than not of compliance,
Mm.
of authoritarian control. You're going to listen to me. It was very, believe it or not, that's actually just as emotionally enmeshed in a different way than the gentle parenting of today, where everything is kind of emotionally meeting the kid always where they're at. The emotional enmeshment of previous parents was more of like they're taking everything personally, which I always say is ironic because they were the generation that invented sticks and stones will break my bones, but words will never hurt me. And they actually get more offended than millennials did with their kids talking to them in certain ways. So it's kind of like laughable that they have this approach and then they get physically violent and the kid would call them a name. It's like, oh my, it's kind of ridiculous when you think about it now, but back then that was like normal, right? So I think a lot of that, again, parents are stuck with that modeling and they are like, yeah, well, I need to be respected, but I don't want to hit them.
Yes.
And if I use consequences, I don't want to be controlling, but then they're out of control and I don't know what to do. So they're stuck between this rock and a hard place, which is why I created my system, because parents want to maintain those two things, you know?
Absolutely. So let's talk solutions for a minute. Many modern parents feel like they're just constantly reacting.
Mm-hmm.
How can we shift in a more intentional, connected parenting?
That's a great question. So I focus on instilling principles instead of focusing on problems. Most parents are reactive because they're stuck in the minutia, the details of the moment. And not only that, I mean, parents today have like limited bandwidth. I don't know if you saw the Surgeon General, the U.S. Surgeon General came out with a parent warning on how horrifying and emotionally exhausting it is to raise kids in today's day and
Right.
age. Yeah, it's like, it's incredible. And it's actually, if you go look at the data, it's scary true. Um, and so a lot of parents, again, they're stuck in their past, in their modeling, their limited modeling from their family of origin, and they're stuck in the details and the minutia. And not only that, they're getting fed a lot of the social media snippets of like meeting them where they're at, and all great, well-intentioned things. But they're also emotionally taxing, they're cumbersome, and they're not sustainably realistic, right? And which is why a lot of these things tend to then get quickly out of hand, because I work with a lot of parents that try that and then they get emotionally resentful, angry, they start yelling again because they're not sustainable. They'll work temporarily, but they're not really instilling that character in the kid for them to continue to develop some intrinsic motivation. They're always extrinsically motivated or need this external. And so, I think by focusing on principles instead of problems, you can have these broad, and I can give you some examples for you and your audiences. The principles give you a broad overarching idea that will encapsulate a lot of the problems. I use the visual image of an umbrella, right? You hold the stem of the umbrella, and underneath the umbrella, there's all the wires that hold the mesh together. Think of all those wires as problem content pieces. Like, I'll give you an easy example. Like, if you have a kid who interrupts the parents when they're talking about something important, if they're constantly leaving their backpack, in the living room, they're the kid that takes their socks off, and then you find that the couch has somehow become a sock eating monster
Oh,
because
yes.
they're in all the cracks, right? Which I think is hilarious because you're like, how many socks do you actually have in this couch? You also look at a kid who's, also probably struggling to go to bed at night and constantly trying to come in and out of mom and dad's room.
Yes.
The principle there would be probably consideration, right? And being able to have consideration for other people. It might also be perseverance, right? They need to persevere with waiting to talk until their parents are done talking. They might need to have consideration that people are talking and interrupting them might not be the considerate thing to do. It might be, hey, everybody sits on the couch. Nobody wants your stinky, dirty socks here. And this might be also an opportunity for you to persevere to put them where they belong. So this also changes a lot of the dialogue that you're having then with your kid. It goes from being hyper negative to hyper positive. It goes from them being bad instead to now they're learning. So it also reframes it for the parents. Because more importantly, the reason the parents are reacting is because the story they're telling themselves is what they're reacting to. Oh, here they go again. They lift their socks in the right, instead of, oh, again, they're having a hard time persevering and being able to have consideration. And this is where, again, and I'll talk to you a little bit about this. I'm sure you'll get to this in a little bit, is where strategic leverage and strategically using consequences, not to just change behavior, but for them to recognize the importance of them having consideration and persevering for their own pride and for their own character, and for them to start to actually feel good about themselves. And not only that, to start to get more of the social reciprocity that they're looking for, right? If you raise a kid that doesn't have consideration and struggles with persevering, they're not going to have a great time in life. I don't care how emotionally connected or attuned or how gentle and loving or what your bond is with your kid, they're going to have a bad time.
Absolutely.
Right? So that's a big portion of what I can help. And I have a whole laundry list of principles that allow you to kind of boil out a lot of the details and the minutia, because kids love to debate and argue. I mean, they're like, love getting into the weeds and the details and the specifics and debate parents. They love that all day. They'll do that all day.
The negotiation, right? That's what I tell my son, who's almost 5. We have our older children are similar in age. And I say, we got to move beyond negotiation. This is not a negotiation situation.
Well, that's where you could start to say hey, buddy, this is just a great opportunity for you to manage disappointment and persevere and move on. Another one's accepting no. That's a common principle, right? Some kids have a hard time accepting no or managing disappointment. That can kind of be, depending on the context, interchanged. But that's where you can almost nip that in the bud and just keep repeating yourself. And again, I'm sure your son, like mine, has a hard time managing disappointment and persevering and being able to shift when things don't go their way, or accepting no is a tough one.
Because frankly, for the vast majority of children today, their lives are pretty good, right?
So they're spectacular.
They don't live in this world where they have to face hard things. And so teaching them about these things like perseverance or about disappointment isn't always readily available.
Well, we used to have a lot of external things that worked in the world where you had to set yourself up to manage disappointment by virtue of getting something that you wanted. Like the one that I use for a lot of the parents to kind of educate them on this is dial-up internet.
Sure.
If you wanted to go on the internet and talk to your friends, you would have safeguard the phone and make sure nobody was going to pick up the landline. You had to start the computer up, which took 7 minutes. Then once you got it started up, then you would have AOL Connect and then yell at everybody and make sure no one picked up the phone because you were using the internet. And then just to get on a website was a 15, 16-minute ordeal. Sure. And then once you got the website up, you had to wait for it to fully load on top of people instant messaging you, which would slow it down. There was built-in patience. We don't even wait in line for coffee anymore as adults.
You're right. Entirely.
So part of what I challenge parents to do is embrace some of these opportunities, even yourself, to take your kids through this process of like waiting in line at a Starbucks,
Sure.
or being able to like not always give them the phone when you're out for 20 minutes
Absolutely.
and like, engage with them, right? Like it's very common. Even I went to the mall the other day with my kiddo, and they have the carts that you can rent.
Yes.
And they got tablets built into them. I'm like, oh my God, this is terrifying.
Right. I hear you.
They can't even sit in a car seat or a stroller anymore without wanting something.
You're right.
The longer you can hold off on that, the better.
I understand. I hear you. Okay. So you're alluding to it. We're talking about sort of some principles here, and talk about how people can do implementation.
Yeah.
So
like
how do they do the implementation? So they're faced with a child who has, let's say, perseverance problems. How do they implement it? Is it talking it through? Is it other steps? Demonstrating it? Explain that piece.
Yeah. So it's a big part of my system. So I'll give you like the broad overview of my system, and then I can give you hallmark snippets of it that will ultimately show it. But my whole system is 5 modules. So there's your family of origin. So people need to go through and reflect on how their upbringing is kind of triggering them or impacting them in a negative way or contributing to limited strategies. 2 is rapport. Most parents today don't actually have great rapport with their kids. Some of them have too good of rapport with their kids. Like some of them have like such exceptional rapport that now they've almost become like a groupie or a fan girl
a friend.
of their child.
They're
and
a
what they did,
friend,
right?
and you want to be a friend and a parent, but there's a
Well,
certain level
I
of...
say this. Yeah, I say this to parents. Your job is to be friendly and not be friends with them.
Okay.
Right? So I think building rapport is an incredibly important piece, which is where you're really invested in the child's unique individuality and areas of interest that they care about exclusively. A lot of parents look for overlap, which is okay, right? It's great that you have overlap, but that's not going to get you deep rapport that you really need so that the kid feels valued in their individuality. Because again, if you're just looking for overlap, then you're probably going to get enmeshed, which is not good, and then you're kind of not drawing a boundary or hierarchy. So you have a responsibility to uniquely meet your kid where they're at and what they care about. Module 3 are like the core components of my system. So understanding the difference between accountability and compliance, which people are stuck in compliance and going to accountability. I help parents, and this is one of the components, and I'll talk about it, that's important for strategy, is you need to be asking emotionally reflective questions. Most parents are talking at their kid. Or what they're doing is they're just hyper fixated on the emotion and what they're experiencing and what they're feeling. And then they're coming up with a strategy for their kid. We don't do that. I don't recommend that at all, because as soon as you start doing that, you're enmeshing yourself into their outcome. And now if they get an outcome that your hands or you've been a part of getting them to come up with, you keep all the pride.
Yeah.
And then they're your little minion slave, and we don't like that. Kids don't like that. And you'll unintentionally but well-intentioned work yourself into more of that enmeshed dynamic, which you don't want. And so I have these core components that help maintain that healthy but loving, firm hierarchy. And then modules 4 is a learning week. So this is probably where strategy is going to come in, where you should be trying to have a sit down with the whole family, not just with one of the kids, all of the kids. So if you're multiple kids, you should sit down. And I have parents do almost a hard reset where they talk about a lot of the ways in which they've done things that are well-intentioned but hurtful or wrong. If they take full responsibility, because we want to model taking responsibility. And we do a hard reset where we start talking to the kids about, hey, we're realizing we want to have more fun. We're also transitioning. You guys are getting older now. We're going to start holding you accountable. We don't want to tell you what to do anymore. You guys don't even like it, and we quite honestly hate it. So we're going to shift to kind of holding you guys a little bit more accountable and letting you make more of your own individual choices. And for this week, we're going to really try and steer clear of not using any sort of consequences, because we want to help start to get you guys understanding that these principles are something that we want to help you guys instill in your character. And so parents kind of then incorporate and introduce the principles in order to ultimately have the kids recognize what they are. And I have parents give examples. We usually do this family dialogue around something that's enjoyable, like pizza or ice cream, because that's going to keep them there. Keep it short, brief, and like really, there's like a couple sections in there that I can give people. But your goal is to just kind of introduce the principles and just let your kids know that you're going to try and start to create more dialogue with them. And you're going to ask these emotionally reflective questions. And this is probably the best piece of advice or strategy that I can give parents is you should have these 3 questions, constantly be repeating them with your kid. Which is, hey, kiddo, what were you feeling that led to you doing this? Because all kids operate straight out of emotion, right? Kids operate like this. They have an emotion, they react impulsively to it, and then they loosely rationalize and justify why they did what they did.
What were you feeling?
Yeah, so the first one is, hey, what were you feeling that led to you, interrupting Dad and I? And this is something you can do afterwards, because if the kid's emotional, you're not going to activate any sort of frontal lobe of their brain. But the goal is to start to challenge the frontal lobe of their brain so you can start to wire this bad boy up, right? Because when they're really young, there's very loose associations of logic, right? So, hey, what were you feeling that led to you doing that? And then what I challenge parents to do is validate. Validation is understanding. It doesn't mean you agree with it.
Okay.
So you can say like, hey, I get it. You're really excited to tell Dad and I this. You've been holding this in and you were really, really excited. I can understand why you would want to interrupt us. It doesn't mean that it's acceptable.
Right.
But you can say that to the kid because you want to connect and recognize that what they're feeling is reasonable. What they're doing, though, goes against the principles.
Okay.
So you'd say, hey, I get why you feel that way. I can get why you'd want to interrupt this. And even though you feel that way, why wasn't this necessarily a great choice?
Yep.
Based on some of the principles that Dad and I, Mom and I have been talking about.
Yeah.
And again, this is where more often than not the kids say, I don't know, because they're lazy. They're used to you lecturing them. They don't like thinking. They just like having fun. And so you try and challenge them to think of one of the principles. And then the last question is hey, listen, you're going to have this feeling again. This is going to happen. And we don't want to hold you accountable. We don't want to have any sort of consequences happen because we know that you're somebody that's considerate, kind, you're a leader, you're thoughtful, you're conscientious, right? All these positive labels. So what are you going to do differently in the future so that this ultimately doesn't lead to you being held accountable? And you try and get them to come up with a strategy of what they are going to do. More often than not, kids tell you what they're not going to do. Well, I'm not going to interrupt you again.
Yeah,
that's like going to a cheesecake factory and telling them you don't want the fish tacos.
Sure.
There's the Bible of food at the cheesecake factory. You got to give them something.
Right.
So a big portion of that is you want to try to get them to come up with their strategy. And then once they have their strategy, you want to cheerlead them on. And then in the future, they're going to interrupt you again. And you can say, hey, this is a great chance for you to try your strategy. What are you going to do? And lo and behold, they don't do it. They just keep interrupting you. And this is why we have Module 5, which is strategic consequences, leverage, and avoiding these power struggles so you can start to develop a loving but firm hierarchy. And that's another piece of strategy that I help a lot of parents do, where if you don't have strategic leverage, you're probably getting into power struggles with your kids. If you're getting into a power struggle with your kid, then you're an equal, and they're coming in and out of that hierarchy, which is also anxiety provoking, right? If they can come in and out of that, they're like, are you actually in control? Like, do you actually have stability, or can I come in? And that's usually a big foundational piece to it. So I help parents avoid those power struggles. I have these 3 leverage litmus tests, because if you don't have leverage, then you don't have a hierarchy. So the first one is you're not going to get into any verbal or physical altercations to get access to whatever you're going to use as a consequence. You're not going to use socialized consequences to other family members, meaning you're not going to like say, you know what, we were going to go to the movies today, but now we're not because you're not able to blah, 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 blah. Well, everyone else is like, well, you're going to give the kid a false impression they can actually control the whole family, which again, hierarchical structurally, not a good idea. And then the last one is do you have the emotional bandwidth to do what you need to do in your adult life so that you're not getting overwhelmed, stressed, and reactive? Because if you're not strategic and you're not waiting until you have the bandwidth, you're going to then regress and start making threats.
Totally key.
So the other thing is I also help parents never threaten. Because if you're threatening them, again, you're in compliance. Instead, we wait until we have leverage, and then we just execute on holding them accountable. So more often than not, the kids will come down the next morning and the Xbox is gone. And the kid's like, where's my Xbox? And they freak out. It's like, oh, no, hey, it's okay. Like, I have it. We're holding you accountable. Yesterday you had a hard time with consideration, and this is where they go a little cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. But
Sure.
because you pass those 3 leverage litmus tests, you're able to anticipate, and I have a whole set of strategies that I help parents do to continue to maintain that loving boundary and keep the pressure on the kid to maintain that reflection and that to own what their choices are rather than falling into enmeshment. So those are some of the strategies that I can give parents to start thinking a little bit differently about. They're also all outlined in my book.
I love it. I can see how it changes the dynamics between the parents and the children, but not in a bad way, in a frankly incredibly positive way. You have the parents in their parent role, children in their children role. Everyone gets along. It's a loving relationship, but there's a whole lot more communication and frankly thought.
Yeah. Yeah, and because you're also doing this more proactively, because my system's a feedback loop, you repeat it.
Sure.
Which makes it far easier, by the way, for parents. Instead of these like sticker, you're also not going to hear me ever talk about rewards. There's no sticker charts. There's none of that because you're just extrinsically creating motivation. You're not creating character. Sure. This is why I also don't kind of agree with some of the gentle parenting stuff because more often than not, the problem solving is relational, which is enmeshment, and any sort of outcome that the kid gets isn't entirely theirs.
Yeah.
It's part of the parents, and now you have this false precedence that you're setting, which sounds and feels great for the parent and for the kid initially, but as time goes on, they never work themselves out of that. They're still kind of enmeshed, and that's not a sustainable long-term process, which is why mine's a lot different than that. Like, that's why I use consequences, because kids need to also understand that there are standards and that there are conditions to being accepted and connected. Like unconditional love, this is not a popular thing, but I tell people this all the time. Unconditional love outside of your family doesn't exist. Everyone else in the world is going to have conditions on your kid. Everyone. And if you don't help them understand that, you're setting them up for a reality which a lot of young adults are now in the adult world and like can't even fathom some of this stuff. They're like shocked. Sure. And it's like, yeah, that's how the world works. But because they grew up in that dynamic, you're shell shocking them into adulthood. And it's quite honestly why I'm eternally in business, even working with young adults.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. I see it.
Yeah.
Okay, let's turn the switch a minute here. Talk about couples. So how do the couples' relationship dynamics impact the parenting system? And parents who feel like they're out of sync as partners, do you have any solutions for them?
Yeah, here's what I'll tell you. I say this to everybody. It's actually in the intro of my whole program, is your marriage should take more of a priority over your parenting because that also is establishing the hierarchy. If your kid, I have parents today, and it's gotten completely out of hand, and there's plenty of books out there that talk about this where we've gotten almost hyperly addicted to youth sports and being hell-bent on kids literally playing as if they're in a major league when they're playing in a club team that travels to the tri-state area. It's like wild. And there's actually a really great book. It's called Take Back the Game by Linda Flanagan. And she talks about how this has just become a money-making machine and how it's destroying marriages, families. And I think a lot of people think like, oh, well, my kids should take priority because I watched my parents and they were spending all this time together and they didn't want to spend time. And if we wanted to spend time with them, we had to do what they wanted to do. And so they almost have some unconscious programming that like if they're reprioritizing their marriage, they're not loving their kid, which is nothing further from the truth. Because if your marriage is wrong, your kids will feel that, see that, and experience that, which also reduces all their anxiety, a lot of their codependence. They'll feel a sense of reassurance by seeing that. And so I tell couples all the time, I'm like, listen, you'd be better off putting some energy and time into your marriage.
Yes.
And that usually, let me just warn everybody on this. Your kids usually get worse before they get better when you do that.
It makes sense. Less
They're not
time,
used to that,
right?
and they are hopeful that
Hmm.
if they create a stink, that you'll go, oh, maybe this is hurting them. Oh, maybe we shouldn't go. Oh, maybe, and that nothing is further from the truth. You should absolutely do that because that's also modeling for
Hmm.
them what a healthy marriage should look like for them, right?
Right,
When they're
right.
growing
That's
up.
what you want. Like, at the end of
Yeah,
the day, our whole goal is to have independent, I like to say, contributing members of society.
yeah,
And a part of that, for many of them, will be marriage.
yeah.
And you hope that they can emulate a positive marriage from you.
Yes, yes. We take modeling more than we take what's told to us. Right. This is why a lot of people, even when I work with couples, a lot of their dysfunction in their communication patterns are rooted from their role and the dynamic, not what was said to them. It's how people interacted with them.
Hmm.
So yeah, your marriage should take more of a priority. You should be going out, and even if your kids have to sacrifice a little sacrifice, because they need to also understand that. I'll give you another one that is crazy that I talk about that people think I'm nuts when I talk about, but it's a outward metaphor. It's an actual symptom that tells you that the family doesn't have a hierarchy, and people call me crazy when I say it, but if your kids use your master bathroom
Yes,
and are able to come in and out of your bedroom as
yes,
the parent suite, you have a hierarchy issue.
yeah,
Your kids should be in their own bathroom. And the only caveat to that is your bathroom is the only one with a tub for your kids. Other than that, if your kids have their own bathroom, or if they, and more often than not, they do,
yes,
they should be in that because that is a hierarchical thing. And that is something that if you want to have a special bath night with them and it's a bonding thing, do that. I'm not saying never do that.
yes.
But what I'm saying is if that's like their entitlement to that, you have a problem. You have a hierarchy issue. And I've seen that even play out with teenagers where they'll leave the floor all wet, they'll leave a towel on the floor.
Yeah.
It's an outward representation of they don't actually think that the hierarchy is legitimate. They think that they're kind of entitled to be there, and that's an outward expression of that. So that's also another thing that would also kind of reframe and restructure your hierarchy. And you can do that in a very loving and firm way, like, hey, you guys are older now, you have
Yes.
your own space, this is ours. And if you're going to use this, you have to be welcomed into it. That's something I would highly recommend parents do. Because if you don't, that's just one of many areas where it starts to erode at that hierarchy.
I never would have thought of it, but I can see
Yeah.
that those principles, which is this is our space, not your space. You have your space. It's a lovely space. That's your space, but
Yeah.
I have my space. And you can share it sometimes, just not all
Yeah.
the time.
Yes. Yes. It's the same thing with kids sleeping in the bed.
Oh,
Your
100%.
kids should not be sleeping in your bedroom.
Agreed.
There was a whole movement of parenting and attachment, and they called it nesting. It sounds really cute, like baby birds and mama birds, and we're all
Let's
nothing
snuggle
is more
together.
emotionally.
It's
Oh yeah,
horrible.
there's so much enmeshment that goes into there.
Yeah.
I'm not saying you don't have a family movie night in your
Right.
bed. I'm not saying you don't have your kids come in the morning when everybody's up and they knock on the door and you welcome them into your room. But them coming in at 2 o'clock in the morning and trying to sleep with you,
No.
them trying to fall asleep or having you fall asleep in their bed, not
Agreed.
healthy, not sustainable, not great for their psychological, emotional well-being, and not good for your family hierarchy. There's like so many things wrong with that on a family systems level. It's laughable.
100% with you on that. Okay. Let's switch gears here for a minute. Let's talk about parenting yourself. You have two small children. You said you have a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old, I believe.
Yeah.
Let's talk real parenting here for a moment. Parenting flops. They're just a way of life. We're all
Yeah.
human. Talk to us about a parenting flop that you've had, that if you had a redo, you'd change.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I'll give you one. I'll give you an easy one. And my wife's helped me see this. My wife's fantastic. Without her, I'd be lost. Um, I grew up I had to grow up early. My mom passed away. I had a lot of expectations to like kind of keep things normal. So I had this unconscious kind of like perception that um, I had high expectations or things that I expected from my little guy that were like laughable, like absolutely ridiculous, right? And in hindsight, right, you're always able to see it, but unconsciously, and look, and I do this for a living, and I'm even guilty of it, right?
Sure.
Like, because this is a part of why I do the work that I do, is like your self-awareness around your expectations and even your own kind of stuff growing up is going to bleed in and come out. And so like there were times where I had like a complete unrealistic expectation, or I didn't want something getting possibly broken, so I would like freak out. I'm like, no, Mason, wait, no. And I would like be like hyper anxious about something that was like ridiculous.
Yeah.
Those are the ones I would go back and completely redo. Because at the end of the day, you're gonna like if you have kids, things are getting broken. Like nothing is staying nice long, right? Like you almost have to give yourself over to that.
Yes.
Where like the cabinets are scratched, like the floors are destroyed, like they're gonna break.
100%.
It's bound to happen. Again, like it's your own stuff that winds up bleeding in, and like that awareness. And a lot of people struggle like with this because again, it's subconscious more often than not. And if you have a great spouse like mine, they'll help you look at that and be like, what are you doing? Like, this is so ridiculous. Like, why are you freaking out about this? And I challenge people to like kind of like lean into that, because we don't usually address our spouses in a way that's usually the best either when they start to do stuff.
Sure.
Because outwardly you're like, how can you not see this? Like, are you kidding me? My wife also likes to remind me, like, you do this for a living and this is how you're, right? So like that gets thrown in my face. But again, it's endearing because she's trying to get me to like look at something in a way that you're not going to outwardly see right out of the gate. No matter how self-aware you are.
Well, it goes back, right? We're all humans. None of us are perfect.
Yeah, no.
And frankly, we don't expect the reverse of our children. It's just figuring out the right way for all of us to live.
Yeah, and your kids' personalities have so much to do with it too.
Yeah.
Because their personalities, I always tell this to parents too, it's like the kids are going to link up and sync up with one parent more than the other. Like my son and my wife are eerily more similar, and then me and my daughter are more similar. And like things that my wife reacts to with my daughter, I don't, and things that I react to with my son, my wife like gets. And so that's a common thing that I think a lot of people, they're like, oh, well, are you playing favorites? It's like, it's not a favorite. It's that you just have an unconscious, almost like simpatico understanding of, whereas the other kids, you might have to work at that. You know what I mean? Like you have to kind of, and that's why you have a spouse, right? Because they're like, no, this is what's really kind of going on. You're like, I wouldn't have thought of it that way. You know what I mean?
I get it.
So, yeah.
Let's talk here for a minute about products. Here at Maribou, we focus on helping parents find the right products easily. So let's talk baby and child products for a minute from a father's perspective. Do you have a product that you think all dads should know about? Do you have a favorite?
Oh, God. I did have a diaper bag that was like incredible. And when I did use it, it was a little bit bigger and bulkier, but that was like game changing.
Backpack?
Yeah, it was a backpack. Yeah, and it had you'd pull the top open. I actually have it in the other room. And it had the changing pad right in there.
Yes.
You had the compartments for the diapers and the wipes. It had a spot for like a battery pack.
Okay.
For like charging your phone, so if you were on the go, you could also use it as a to connect bottle warmers and stuff if you had like an accessory. But that was game changing. I have something smaller now because my kids, like my 2-year-old, I still gotta have diapers. I use just a crossbody now.
Yes.
From Chrome Industry. They're like a bike gear manufacturer. Yes. I have like a crossbody that has a buckle on it.
Yes.
And my wife's like, what do you have that for? I'm like, it's better than carrying, she's got the nice Gucci diaper bag. I'm like, I'm not carrying that around. Like,
I get it.
It's huge.
I say that all the time to new dads. I say, figure out what your gear source is going to be, because 100% of the time, almost, it's not going to be what your wife's carrying.
No, it's not. So that was a real good one. I'm trying to think of what else, like...
well, I want that you do the reverse with you for a minute, which is, do you have a product fail moment where you wished either a product performed better or you just totally failed at using it?
Ooh, I don't know, because We had like a snoo
Okay.
that was game-changing for us.
Yes.
Like the snoo was like insane. They've kind of messed it up now because you got to do like a subscription model.
Right.
They kind of like ruined it. They really did, and it soured everybody. And I think everybody's still kind of, they're like penny pitching because it's so expensive to buy right out of the gate.
Right.
And then
It
if
is.
you resell it, that was the beauty of it, is you could like resell them, and they were like, yeah, we're hemorrhaging money with all these resales, so like we need people buying new, which is kind of ridiculous. But again, that was like a game changer. I loved the snoo, but nothing that I can really think of that we used where I was like,
That's good though.
yeah, no, I honestly, we had the Mamaroo.
Yes.
That was great. We had the snoo. We had a good formula like dispenser that we liked.
Mm-hmm.
That was
Probably
good.
the Baby Brezza.
Yeah, the Baby Brezza was banging. Like that was a great one. But no, I don't think we had anything. I'm trying to like even think of. I will tell you, the one thing that drives me nuts are the stroller attachments for Up a Baby.
Oh, I know. They're hard.
And like you can't just have one. I had to buy a bunch of extra attachments. I wound up going to Florida once and I forgot them.
Yes.
And like I couldn't put the seat. I'm like, you can't integrate all these. Like, come on, really? You're like nickel and diming me. I think the cup holder was like $50.
Yes.
And it broke. That's the one. That's the one. The Up a Baby
There's
cup
your fail.
holder.
Total
Up a
Baby
fail.
Cup holder.
That thing snapped. It had like the cheapest
Well, it
plastic.
extends too. It extended, and so it got stuck in things. It's very easy for that to break.
Oh yeah, and it was cheaply made. I'm like, this is for like travel strollers. Like this thing's got to be durable. What is this? That was the one.
I think it's better to, when I talk to people about having a catch-all and then putting your drinks in the catch-all.
Yeah.
I just personally have found much more success
those are the ones
in that regard.
Yeah, I've had those. We have those like the aftermarket ones where they like just Velcro onto the handles. Way better.
Yeah.
Infinitely better. Infinitely better.
Okay. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the Modern Parenting Manual. We hope you found it helpful and inspiring. If you enjoyed the show, please take a moment to subscribe to our podcast and leave us a review on YouTube. Your feedback means the world to us and helps others discover our podcast too. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram and YouTube to stay updated on upcoming episodes, behind-the-scenes content, and everything else. Thank you again for being part of our podcast community. Until next time, you've got this.